A millionaire invites his ex-girlfriend to his wedding to humiliate her, but she arrives with 2 children who look exactly like him. Jordan Fortes, a successful millionaire, sat on his large balcony overlooking the city, the sunset reflecting off the huge windows of his penthouse apartment. His face showed a mixture of satisfaction and something darker, a spark of revenge that made him clench his fists gently. Jordan had meticulously planned his wedding, every detail carefully orchestrated to be a display of power and success. He was at the height of his career, a business tycoon who had built an empire from virtually nothing. But material success had not erased the scars of his past, especially those left by Clara Medeiros, the woman he had once loved with all his heart. "She thought I would be nothing," Jordan muttered to himself, his voice thick with disdain. "Now she'll see what she missed." The wedding would be a grand affair, held on a private island paradise with guests from high society, celebrities, and the most powerful in the business world. But for Jordan, the cherry on the cake would be Clara's presence. Not for love or nostalgia, but for the opportunity to show her how far he had come in life since she left him. He picked up the phone and called his personal assistant, Mariana, an efficient and discreet woman who knew how to handle his requests, no matter how unusual. "Mariana, make sure Clara Medeiros receives a special invitation to my wedding. I want her there, in the front row," Jordan instructed, his voice firm. "Of course, Mr. Fortes," Mariana replied on the other end of the line without question. Jordan hung up and leaned back in his chair, a cold smile touching his lips. He imagined Clara receiving the invitation, surprised, perhaps even shocked. The thought pleased him. He wanted her to see how he had triumphed, how the young architect she had abandoned had become a powerful and influential man. "She'll be there," he thought, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes, "and she'll see what could have been." With that decision made, Jordan felt invigorated. The past that had haunted him would finally be buried beneath the weight of his victory. The game was set, and he was eager to watch Clara's reaction when the roles were reversed. As the soft evening breeze began to blow through the open windows, Jordan Fortes leaned back on the leather sofa, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The strong drink went down slowly, but it wasn't the warmth of the alcohol that made his chest tighten. It was the memory of Clara Medeiros, the woman who had once been everything to him. 8 years ago, Jordan was just a young architect, full of dreams but struggling to survive in the competitive business world. He and Clara met in a small cafe where he would spend hours drawing designs and sketching ideas. Clara, with her vibrant energy and charming smile, worked as a barista there, and it was love at first sight. Jordan could vividly remember the nights when, after closing the cafe, Clara would sit next to him to listen to his ideas and encourage him. She believed in him when no one else did. "You have talent, Jordan. One day, the world will see it," she would say, her eyes shining with unwavering faith. They dreamed together, planning a future where Jordan would be a renowned architect and Clara a dedicated doctor. They had little money, but the love they shared seemed enough to overcome any obstacle. But then reality began to set in. Jordan's projects weren't bringing in the expected returns. The bills were piling up, and the pressure on them grew. Jordan began to feel inadequate, unable to provide the life Clara deserved. "You deserve more than this, Clara," he had said one night, after yet another project had been rejected. "I can't give you anything but empty promises." "I don't care about the money, Jordan. I believe in you. In us," Clara insisted, holding her hands tightly. But Jordan's doubts gnawed at his spirit, and he began to pull away, trying to protect her from a life of uncertainty. Until one day, Clara left, leaving only a letter in which she said she needed to follow her own path, that she could no longer wait for a future, that seemed so far away. Jordan reread that letter in his mind every night, every word etched in his memory. He couldn't blame Clara for leaving. After all, he himself had let fear and insecurity destroy what they had. Now, sitting in his luxurious penthouse, Jordan knew that their deep love had never been completely erased. He had buried his emotions beneath layers of success and ambition, but the impending reunion with Clara was unearthing all the memories and feelings he had tried to suppress. "Does she still think about me?" Jordan whispered to himself, feeling the old pain and desire mix in his heart again. He shook his head, trying to push the thoughts away. He didn't want love. He wanted revenge, or so he told himself. Clara was on her last shift of the day at the hospital. The emergency room hallway was bustling as usual, with doctors and nurses rushing back and forth, attending to urgent cases. She moved with precision and calm. Her years of experience as a doctor reflected in her every move. Yet despite the pressure of work, something in his mind kept returning to that letter. The white envelope was sitting on her desk, seemingly so ordinary, but with an immense weight. It was the invitation to Jordan Fortes's wedding. His name was written in the same careful handwriting as always, something she immediately recognized. Clara had waited for a sign from him for so long, but life had moved on. She had built her career, graduated as a doctor, and had grown accustomed to the idea that Jordan was a thing of the past. But when she looked at the invitation, she felt a whirlwind of emotions. Opening the envelope, she read the carefully crafted words and felt a mix of nostalgia and apprehension. The memory of the love they had shared, the promises they had both made, and of course, the abrupt breakup that had left her lost for so long. The feeling of abandonment had never completely gone away, but Clara had learned to deal with it. She took a deep breath, looking at the paper. Jordan Fortes, getting married on a private island, she thought, almost in disbelief. It wasn't just an invitation. It was a wedding. It was a display of everything he had become, of everything she had never had. She knew he had become a powerful, wealthy, and successful man, but what really made her hesitate was the feeling that he was doing this for her. As if the marriage was just another way to show off his success and humiliate his past choices. But even so, something pushed her to accept. She didn't want to get involved in the spectacle he had put on, but the invitation left her feeling incomplete. Clara wasn't there out of curiosity about the luxury or the temptation of seeing Jordan at his peak, but out of a deeper need, to seek answers. Why did he ask me? Clara wondered quietly as she continued to stare at the invitation. She remembered the pain she had felt when Jordan had simply walked away, when he had given her no explanation for the abrupt end of their relationship. Why hadn't he had the courage to talk to her? Why hadn't he responded to her attempts to contact him as if she were just a ghost in his life? With these questions echoing in her mind, Clara made a decision. She would not go to the wedding to confront the new Jordan, the millionaire, the successful one. She would go to seek an answer, an explanation for the abandonment, to understand what had really happened between them, no matter how difficult or uncomfortable it was. She needed this answer so she could move on for good. "I will," she whispered to herself, tucking the invitation into her purse. "I will." The wedding day arrived, and the island where Jordan had chosen to get married was more stunning than he could have imagined. The resort was impeccably prepared, its white walls reflecting the golden light of the afternoon sun, while the crystal-clear waters around the island sparkled like diamonds. The entire island seemed to exude an intoxicating luxury, a place where dreams come true. The decor was perfect, with fresh flowers scattered throughout, the soft sound of an orchestra filling the air, and the sophisticated guests enjoying themselves in a setting that looked like a scene from a movie. Jordan, however, was not enjoying the scene. He stood by the altar, a fake smile on his face as he greeted the guests and received greetings from friends and family. But his mind was far from all that. His attention was completely focused on Clara's arrival. He felt a growing nervousness, a mix of anticipation and anxiety. When she arrived, he would see her, perhaps for the last time, in this scene where he controlled everything. "Clara is on her way," he whispered to his best friend, who was standing next to him. "Everything needs to be perfect." He looked out to sea in front of him, where Clara's boat finally appeared on the horizon, cutting through the calm waters, approaching the shore. His eyes narrowed, and his heart beat faster. But it wasn't just because of her presence. He was tense, sensing that something big was about to happen. Clara stepped off the boat gracefully, the wind playing with her hair as she approached, wearing an elegant black dress that contrasted with the white of the other women's dresses. But what really made Jordan stop and hold his breath wasn't Clara's appearance. It was what she brought with her. Beside her were two boys, twins, who had jumped out of the boat with excitement, laughing and playing. Jordan watched them with a fixed gaze, completely transfixed. There was something about the boys' features that made his stomach flip. John and Jonathan. The boys didn't just look like him. They were the exact replica of his youth, as if life had shown him a younger version of himself. The brown hair, the deep dark eyes, the mischievous smile. Jordan was speechless, the thoughts starting to spin rapidly in his mind. How was this possible? Who were these boys? They were with Clara, but why had he never known of their existence? He tried to hide his shock, but he couldn't. His eyes remained fixed on the boys as they played near the sand, giggling and looking curiously at the movement around them. Clara, with a calm smile on her face, walked towards Jordan, but he was completely absorbed by the presence of the boys. "Jordan?" Clara said, interrupting the whirlwind of thoughts that were swirling in her mind. She looked at him with a calm expression, but her eyes seemed to contain an ocean of emotions. She knew that what he was feeling at that moment was much more than surprise. There was confusion, there was pain, and there was an unspoken question hovering between the two of them. "Who are they?" Jordan's voice came out low and trembling, almost a whisper, but loaded with an emotional charge that he could not control. Clara looked at the boys, then at Jordan. Her eyes softened, but there was a certain fear in her expression. She knew that this moment had arrived, the moment she feared, but that was necessary. "They are John and Jonathan," she said, her voice calm, but with a slight tremor. "They are our sons." The revelation hit Jordan like an unexpected, overwhelming wave. He stood still, unable to process the words. The sound of the party in the background seemed to distort, disappearing as he watched Clara and the boys. "Our children." The words echoed in his mind, but he couldn't believe it. The commotion around him began to grow as the guests noticed the similarity between the boys and Jordan. Some whispered among themselves, exchanging surprised glances. Others began to approach, curious to see more closely the children who had the same features as Jordan himself. He didn't know what to do, how to react. His mind was a storm of conflicting feelings. Clara noticed Jordan's lost gaze and, with a gentle gesture, led the boys to him. They approached timidly, looking at Jordan with curiosity, still not understanding the connection between them and this man who seemed so strange, but at the same time familiar. John, the oldest of the twins, looked at Jordan with wide, questioning eyes and, in an innocent tone, asked, "Are you Daddy?" That question, so simple and direct, cut Jordan in a way he didn't expect. He felt his chest tighten, the emotion almost suffocating him. He wanted to answer, wanted to say something, but the words just wouldn't come. He stood there, staring at the boys, not knowing what to do or what to say. Clara watched the scene with a deep gaze, knowing that the time had come for Jordan to face the truth, a truth he had ignored for so long. And now, Everything was about to change. Jordan was paralyzed. His eyes were still fixed on the boys, trying to process everything he had just discovered. He felt lost, as if he were in a dream from which he could not wake up. How could they be his children? He had never known of their existence, and now everything around him seemed to revolve around this unexpected truth. John and Jonathan stood there before him, like two small versions of himself, their eyes curious and innocent, with no idea of the turmoil they were causing inside him. Every laugh, every movement, seemed to make him more aware of the gravity of what was happening. He approached them with hesitant steps, trying to control his emotions, but the truth was about to crush him. When he got close, John, with his mischievous smile, looked directly at him and, with a twinkle in his eyes, extended his hand. "Hi, I'm John," he said in a cheerful voice, but with a seriousness that seemed beyond his years. Jordan hesitated before shaking John's hand, his mind still in shock. He watched the features of his own face reflected in the boys, trying to understand how this was possible. How had he never known about them? Why had Clara never told him anything? Jonathan, the twin brother, was quick to approach as well, his eyes equally large and curious. "Are you our father?" he asked in a softer voice, almost as if trying to understand Jordan's reaction. Jonathan's question cut through the silence sharply, and Jordan swallowed hard. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to deal with this. The words wouldn't come, and the confusion only grew. The image of the young Jordan, the failed architect, the one who could never imagine being a father, seemed so distant now. He wasn't that Jordan anymore. He was a different man, but this responsibility, this truth, was crushing him. He looked at Clara, who was standing a few steps behind him, her arms crossed and a serious expression on her face. Her gaze was fixed on him, waiting for him to do something. He didn't know what to expect. She knew all this. She knew the boys were his, but she never told him. Why? Jordan stepped away from the boys and walked over to Clara, his face a mixture of emotion and restrained anger. He stared at her, trying to maintain his composure, but the pain was evident in his voice. "Why didn't you ever tell me? How could you hide this from me?" Jordan asked, his voice cracking with indignation. He looked at the boys, who were there, playing with each other, and felt a crushing weight on his shoulders. "I'm their father, Clara. How could you hide this from me?" Clara took a deep breath, looking directly into Jordan's eyes. She knew this moment would come. She knew he had a right to know, but she also knew that this wasn't the right time for a deep explanation. Not now, not in the middle of a lavish wedding where everyone was watching. But the need to face the truth was there, and she couldn't run away anymore. "Jordan, this isn't the time," Clara said firmly, her eyes reflecting a pain he didn't fully understand. "I understand your anger, but now is not the place for it. There are many things you need to understand, many things that have happened. I tried to reach out to you after everything, but you were so focused on your career, on your future, that you didn't want to listen to me. And I couldn't wait." Jordan felt the impact of her words like a punch in the stomach. She was right. He had lost himself in the pursuit of success, in the obsession of being someone important. He had distanced himself from everything that really mattered without realizing it. His response, the anger he felt, was just an echo of his own wounded ego. "So, you decided to ignore me?" he asked, the pain in his voice now clearer. "We were important, Clara. I thought we were important. How could you make that decision on your own?" Clara looked at him, the sadness in her eyes shining through. She wanted to say so much more, but she knew that this was not the right place for all of this. She knew that the wounds of the past needed to be healed, but not here, not now. "I didn't know what else to do, Jordan. You were so focused on your career, on your rise. I couldn't wait any longer." I couldn't wait for you to become someone different. I tried to take care of myself and them on my own, but the truth is, I wanted you to be a part of this. I always wanted to, but I also knew, deep down, that you weren't ready, Clara explained, her voice quiet but filled with a weight of regret. Jordan felt the weight of her words. He knew he had failed, but he didn't know how to deal with it now. He looked at the boys once more, his eyes full of confusion and unanswered questions. He wanted to be the father they deserved, but he didn't know where to begin. I need answers, Clara. I need to understand all of this, he said, his voice now soft, almost broken. I can't just ignore this. Clara nodded but kept a respectful distance. I know, Jordan, and one day you'll have all the answers. But for now, let's enjoy the moment. This isn't the right time for these conversations. The boys were nearby, unaware of the weight of that exchange. They were more focused on playing in the sand, giggling, and exchanging curious glances. But Jordan couldn't help but feel that something inside him was breaking. He had so many doubts, so many questions that needed to be answered. Let's take it one step at a time, Jordan, Clara said softly, breaking the silence. I know it's hard. I know this changes everything. But we're going to get through this for our children. Jordan didn't know what to say, but he knew Clara was right. He had to accept that things wouldn't be easy, that the road ahead would be full of challenges. But somehow, he knew it was the beginning of something new. Maybe the beginning of a relationship he never imagined he would have. The party was in full swing. The sound of music mingled with the laughter and lively conversation of the guests as they walked around the luxurious resort, marveling at the stunning scenery of the private island. The lights twinkled, illuminating the faces of everyone present, and waiters passed by with glasses of champagne. But none of that seemed to matter to Jordan at that moment. He was still absorbed in the presence of Clara and her children. The pain and surprise were evident on his face as he watched the boys playing with each other, their small hands dirty with sand, as if nothing was happening around them. Their curious looks, the questions that hung in the air, everything he didn't know about Clara's recent past. He felt lost, as if he were adrift in a sea of emotions that he didn't know how to navigate. Isabella, his fiancée, was trying to get his attention, but he didn't even seem to notice her. She watched him from afar, her smile somewhat forced, as she tried to fit into the perfect scenario that Jordan had planned. She knew he was distracted, but she had no idea how much the reason for it was beyond her understanding. "Jordan, darling," Isabella called, approaching him with a soft smile but a look that hid frustration. She touched him lightly on the shoulder, but he didn't turn around immediately. She took a deep breath and tried again. "Jordan, it's time to cut the cake. Everyone's waiting." He turned to her, as if he had finally remembered her presence, but his eyes were distant. "Oh, of course, Isabella. I got a little lost." Isabella felt a tightness in her chest. She knew what was happening. She could see Jordan's attention focused on Clara, on those boys who, to her surprise, seemed so connected to him in a way she didn't understand. But she wouldn't let that get to her. She was his fiancée, the woman he had chosen to spend the rest of his life with. Deep down, she still believed that was enough. "I know it's complicated, Jordan," she said, trying to be understanding but feeling a twinge of insecurity. "But please don't forget that we're here to celebrate our love." Jordan finally looked at her, but his eyes were still clouded with unanswered questions. He knew how right she was, but at that moment, what he wanted most was to have the answers that Clara never gave him, to understand why all of this happened, and what those children, those boys, meant. He had to find out. He needed to know. "I'm not forgetting, Isabella," Jordan replied in a voice that sounded more distant than he would have liked. I just need a moment. I'm trying to understand everything that's happening." Isabella tried to hide the pain in her eyes. She didn't want to be the woman who complained, but something was breaking inside her. She knew that Jordan still had a past with Clara, a past that could never be erased. And as he pulled further and further away from her, she wondered if what he had with Clara was something she could compete with. "It's okay, Jordan," she said, trying to stay calm. "It's your party. You have the right to do whatever you want." But Jordan wasn't listening completely anymore. His eyes were fixed on Clara, who, with her children by her side, was chatting with some friends. She was elegant, serene, as she always had been, but there was something else in her gaze. He could see the weight she carried, and how much she was also facing her own internal struggles. But he couldn't ignore what was happening with the boys. They were part of him, and that couldn't be ignored. Isabella, with a forced smile, moved away a little, watching from afar. She knew the situation was tense. Maybe, at that moment, what Jordan felt for Clara was stronger than what he felt for her, no matter how much he tried to hide it. She felt the need to act, to take control of the situation. She wouldn't allow Jordan to get lost again, to let his attention be diverted to the past. "I'm going to talk to the waiters and make the final adjustments to the cake," Isabella murmured, turning quickly. "You stay here and enjoy it with the boys." Jordan, still lost in his own thoughts, just nodded, not really paying attention to her words. His thoughts were elsewhere. He wanted to understand why Clara never told him about her children. He wanted to understand what that meant for him, for their future. As Isabella walked away, Jordan stood there, watching Clara, her children, the sea in the background, and the luxury of the party that seemed so empty to him at that moment. What he really wanted now were answers. What he wanted was to understand his own story, a story that was much more complicated than he could ever imagine. Jordan was increasingly immersed in the confusion that took over his mind. The party continued in full swing, with the guests having fun, and the conversations becoming more relaxed, but he could barely pay attention to everything around him. His eyes, always calculating and focused, were now scattered, focused on the sea of uncertainty that was forming in front of him. The twins, John and Jonathan, with their striking features, were a constant in his thoughts. How was that possible? How had he not known anything? The pain of being left out of something so fundamental was eating away at him from within. It wasn't enough to be left out in the past. Now he felt like he was being rejected again, but this time in a crueler way. His children, the children he had never known existed, were the center of everything. He needed to understand. He needed to know why Clara had hidden this part of her life. With a deep sigh, Jordan took his cell phone from his pocket and quickly typed a message to Mariana, his personal assistant. She was competent, trustworthy, and, above all, always willing to help him in any situation. He knew she could help him find the answers he was looking for, no matter how invasive it might be. "Mariana, I need you to investigate Clara's life over the past 8 years. Everything you can find. It could be about her work, her relationships, even her routine. I want to know what she's been up to, especially regarding her children. Don't ask me why. Just do it. I'll wait for information as soon as possible." After sending the message, Jordan leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment, trying to calm down. But he knew he wouldn't be able to rest until he found out what was going on. He couldn't keep Clara and the boys, his new discoveries, out of his mind anymore. There was something there, something he needed to understand, something that couldn't be ignored. As the champagne was served and the laughter continued, Jordan was only concerned about one thing: what Clara had really been up to in the past few years, and, more importantly, what she hadn't told him. Mariana, Jordan's assistant, didn't take long to respond. "Understood, Jordan. I'll start right away. You'll have the first information in a few hours." Jordan, upon receiving the reply, felt a momentary relief. The search for answers was already underway, and he knew that, in the end, he would have everything he needed to understand the situation. But at the same time, he felt a strange sense of unease. What would he do with this information once he had it? Would it really bring the answers he was looking for, or would it just add fuel to the emotional fire that was already consuming his mind? He didn't know, but what he felt now was a mix of anger, frustration, and perhaps regret. Regret for not having been there for Clara, regret for not having been the man she needed at that crucial moment in their lives. And now, as he saw the boys, he felt like he was trying to right a wrong that might be irreparable. With each passing minute, the tension grew, and the weight of his decision to invite Clara to the wedding became clearer and clearer. He couldn't shake the thought that somehow he was seeking more than just revenge. He was searching for something deeper, something that perhaps even he couldn't explain. And so the party continued. But for Jordan, every smile and every glass raised seemed more distant. All he could think about was the investigation that was about to take place and what it could mean for his future and Clara's. Meanwhile, Clara, unaware of what was going on behind the curtains of the party, looked at her children with a serene expression. But her heart was far from there. She knew that Jordan was not simply enjoying the party, and she felt that a confrontation between them was inevitable. She only hoped that he would be able to understand her reasons, that he would know that the truth was not as simple as he seemed to believe. The party was in full swing, but Jordan barely paid attention to his surroundings. Music was playing, conversations were intertwined, but he was in a world of his own, absorbed in thoughts about Clara, the boys, and everything that had happened in the last few years. He couldn't take his eyes off the twins, John and Jonathan. The children, although still young, had an infectious energy, and their incessant questions, each one more curious than the other, made the atmosphere seem denser and more tense. Jordan, trying to distract himself and perhaps somehow create a bond with the boys, approached John and Jonathan. The two were perched near a table, observing the decorations with interest, while laughter echoed in the background. It was a normal scene, if it weren't for the weight of the situation that hung over everything. "Hey, John, Jonathan, how about playing hide-and-seek later?" Jordan asked, with a tight smile, trying to appear relaxed. The boys looked at him with their curious and intense eyes, but it was John who, with a mischievous smile, made an observation that cut through the air. "You have the same eyes as us," he said, his tone light, but with an expression of seriousness that made Jordan's heart race. "They're the same. Mom always says that." Jordan stopped immediately, his smile freezing for a second. He looked at the boys more closely, and in an instant, the world around him seemed to disappear. Those eyes, the same eyes he looked at in the mirror every morning, were now reflected in the faces of the children he had just met. The deep brown eyes, almost golden in the soft afternoon light, could not be a coincidence. He felt a shock wave run through his body. Something seemed not to fit, and that revelation, although simple to the eyes of a child, made Jordan feel a mixture of confusion and mild dread. How had he not noticed before? How had he not seen the resemblance? I never noticed that," Jordan murmured, trying to hide the surprise that was almost overflowing in his voice. "Maybe it's just a coincidence, right?" John looked at him with an innocent expression, but his eyes held something else. There was something in the way he spoke, a naturalness that made the situation seem even more unsettling. Jordan tried not to let his agitation show, but the idea that those boys could be his sons was becoming more and more real in his mind. "Coincidence," Jonathan repeated, lightly and almost playfully. "Mom said you have the same eyes, but you don't come home anymore, so you don't know, do you?" The mere mention of Clara made Jordan's heart clench. He looked away, unable to look at the boys any longer. Their words pierced his mind like a sharp blade, cutting through the facade of control he'd tried to maintain. How had this happened? How had he not known? The idea that he might have children was starting to creep into his mind, and he wasn't sure he was ready for what that meant. I didn't know that, but what else does Mom say about me? Jordan asked, trying to regain control of his voice. He felt a lump in his throat, but he continued with a forced smile. He needed answers. The boys, however, seemed oblivious to the weight of the situation. To them, it was just another innocent conversation. "She says you're the daddy of our eyes," John replied, with the sincerity of a child who had no secrets. "We've just never seen you, so we don't really understand." Jordan felt a chill run down his spine. The boys called him "I Daddy," so naturally that it seemed like an indisputable truth to them. What else had Clara said about him? What else had she hidden? Silence hung for a moment as Jordan tried to process the children's words. What he knew now was that the doubt, once just a distant shadow, had become something concrete. These boys were, without a doubt, his children, and he was not prepared to deal with it, not in the way he had imagined. John and Jonathan went back to playing, unaware of the emotional turmoil they had caused in Jordan's heart. They ran to the other side of the room, leaving him standing there, contemplating the depth of a child's words. He looked at Clara, who was in the other corner of the party, talking to some friends. She seemed so calm, so controlled, and yet he knew that she carried with her the secrets of all this time. How could he have been so blind? How had he not noticed the clues, the words, the signs? "You have the same eyes as us." John's words echoed in Jordan's head, and for the first time, he felt like he was losing control of everything. The tension was increasing with each passing second, and Jordan knew that sooner or later he would have to confront Clara. She could no longer hide the truth, and he needed answers. The sound of the music, the cheerful conversations, the laughter, all of it seemed distant. He was absorbed by a whirlwind of emotions that overwhelmed him, a mixture of anger, confusion, and a growing sense of betrayal. He looked back at the twins, who were playing with other guests. John and Jonathan were so happy, so carefree, and the sight of them was like a reminder of everything he had lost. What else had Clara hidden from him? How could she do this? Jordan could no longer control himself. He knew he needed answers, and he needed them now. With a push, he stood up from where he was, ignoring Isabella, who was trying to get closer to him, and walked quickly towards Clara. She was chatting with a few friends, smiling politely, but Jordan couldn't wait any longer. He needed to talk to her, just the two of them, no one else. "Clara," he called, his voice low but urgent. She looked at him, surprised by the interruption, and gave him a cautious smile, trying to hide the obvious tension between them. "Hi, Jordan. Are you enjoying the party?" "No," he replied brusquely, not wasting time on empty words. "I need to talk to you. Now." Clara heard the seriousness in his tone, and without hesitation, walked away from her friends and headed to a quieter corner of the resort. The soft night wind swayed the palm trees, and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore seemed to soften the tense atmosphere between them. I needed to understand all of this," Jordan said, anger seeping into his voice. "The boys, how could you keep this from me? I'm their father, Clara. How could you exclude me from this part of my life? How could you not tell me?" Clara looked at him with a mixture of pain and patience, knowing that this moment had finally come. She took a deep breath before answering, her voice firm, but sad. "I tried, Jordan," she said, her expression showing a deep weariness. "I tried so hard to reach out to you. I tried so hard to tell you about the boys. I wrote letters, I texted, I called, but I never heard back from you. You were so focused on your career, so immersed in your world, that I thought maybe it would be better to move on alone, for their sake." Jordan felt a lump in his throat. Her words hit him hard. He knew that the blame for not responding to her messages, for isolating himself so much, was his. But the anger was still there, boiling in his chest, mixed with the sense of loss and frustration. I was trying to build my life, Clara, Jordan burst out, his face red with emotion. I didn't know anything. And now you bring these boys, my own blood, to my face, as if nothing had happened, as if I wasn't part of this. Clara looked at him with a sad expression, and for a moment Jordan saw the pain reflected in her eyes. She still loved him, but there was so much resentment, so many unhealed wounds. She had always known that this moment, the moment of facing the truth, would be painful for both of them. I knew you were focused on your work, Jordan. I knew you had big dreams and ambitions, and I didn't want to tie you down to something you weren't ready for. I was afraid you would reject me, that you would reject us. I didn't want the boys to grow up without knowing what a father's love was, without a man who was there to take care of them. Clara paused, her eyes brimming with tears. So I decided to raise them alone. It was hard, very hard, but I had no other choice. Jordan was silent, his mind whirling with everything Clara had just said. He felt a huge weight on his shoulders, reality hitting him hard. He didn't know how to respond. On the one hand, he understood her motivations, but on the other, the pain of betrayal, of abandonment, made his soul twist. You didn't give me a chance, Clara, he said finally, his voice broken. I wanted to be a part of this, but you wouldn't let me. You didn't give me a chance to be the father they needed. Clara looked at him, her gaze deep and sincere. I wanted you to be a part of this so badly, Jordan. I really did. But you were so focused on your own goals that you couldn't see that you had a family waiting for you. I didn't want to wait any longer. I didn't want to suffer alone anymore. The silence between them was long and full of unspoken feelings. Jordan looked at Clara, trying to understand the whirlwind of emotions he was feeling. The anger, the pain, the longing, and a growing need to reconnect with what he had lost. I don't know what to do now, Jordan murmured, his voice hoarse. I don't know how to move forward from all this, how to build a bond with them. How can I redeem myself after all this time? Clara looked at him with a faint hope. Jordan, the first thing you need to do is be honest with yourself. The rest will fall into place in time. The boys have already accepted you. They already see you as a father, even without knowing who you really are. Jordan felt a warmth spread through his chest. Clara's words were harsh, but they carried an undeniable truth. Clara, feeling that the moment called for honest reflection, took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice softer, almost as if trying to put into words something she had long held in. I knew you had big dreams, Jordan, she said, looking off into the distance, as if trying to find a place where she could put all that weight. I saw how much you dedicated yourself to your work, how much you fought to build a solid career. But what I didn't know was if you would really have space to be a father, to be present. I was afraid that if I told you about the boys, you would simply ignore them, or worse, reject us. I was afraid of being one more thing that would take you away from your dream. Jordan listened in silence, her words echoing in his mind like a bitter truth. He never thought the choices he had made in the past could have had such an impact. And now, faced with what he had lost, the pain of not having lived those experiences with his children hit him hard. I always wanted to be there, Clara, Jordan replied, his voice lower, almost as if he were speaking to himself. But I was so focused on making my place in the world, on proving that I could make things happen. I didn't realize that in doing so, I was leaving behind the people who mattered most. He paused, his mind drifting back to that time when everything seemed to revolve around his career, and the idea of building a family seemed distant, even secondary. I never realized how selfish I was being, he said, his voice now filled with regret. "I always thought that if I was successful, that would be enough. But I never thought about what it meant for you, for the boys, for our life together." Clara looked at him, her eyes reflecting a deep sadness, but also a certain understanding. "I know it wasn't easy, Jordan. I know how hard you tried and how much you wanted to achieve your goals. But you lost so much in the process, and not just time with the boys. You lost us. You lost the chance to be part of something bigger than any success you could achieve." They were silent for a few moments, the words still hanging heavy in the air, each of them processing their own failures, their own choices, and what could have been different. "I should have been more patient, Clara," Jordan finally said, his tone filled with genuine regret. "I should have understood that success isn't just about money or recognition, but about being there for the people you love. I let you down. I left you to carry the burden alone." Clara smiled softly, a smile sad, but full of understanding. "I don't blame you, Jordan. I understand. I've made mistakes too, and we're not here to point fingers. What matters now is what we're going to do with it, how we can try to make things right, even if time can't go back." Jordan felt a slight relief, as if, for the first time, the weight of guilt was beginning to lift. He knew he couldn't erase the past, but he felt that perhaps he could build a different future, more conscious, more present. "I want to try, Clara," he said, the sincerity in his voice stronger than ever. "I want to be the father they deserve. I want to be there for you too, if you'll let me." She looked into his eyes, as if weighing his words, and finally nodded. "I let you into their lives, Jordan. Now, it's up to you. But please, don't make empty promises. Show them with your actions. Show them that you're here to stay." Jordan stepped forward, more determined than ever. "I'll show them. I swear I will." They looked at each other, the weight of the past still present, but now with a glimmer of hope. They knew they couldn't change what had happened, but there was something much more important now, the chance to start over. Laughter and conversation filled the luxurious atmosphere of the resort, and the guests enjoyed the fine food and elegant wine served at the table. However, for Jordan, the evening seemed to have lost its sparkle. His eyes were fixed on the boys, John and Jonathan, trying to absorb the reality that he was, in fact, a father, and that this connection with them was something he had missed for so long. It was then that Isabella, his fiancée, approached him with a serious look. Her expression was tense, unlike anything he had ever seen. Jordan knew immediately that something was wrong. "Jordan," she said, her voice firm but full of pain, "I heard the rumors. I saw the way you looked at those boys. And now I know who they are." Jordan's heart raced. He tried to hide it, but the tension in Isabella's expression was unmistakable. She had discovered the truth. Clara, the boys, everything was laid bare before her. "Isabella," Jordan began, trying to explain, but his voice faltered. He never imagined that this moment would come so soon, much less in such a public setting. "No, Jordan, don't give me explanations. I've heard enough," she interrupted, her eyes bright with frustration and hurt. "I understand that you had a past with Clara, but what did you do? How could you hide it from me? How could you live this big secret while we were committed, planning a future together?" Jordan was silent, feeling the weight of her words fall like stones on his soul. He knew he could not justify his omission. Nothing he could say could erase the damage already done. Isabella continued, her voice now low but filled with uncontrollable regret. "I'm not a fool, Jordan. I saw how shaken you were when the boys arrived, how much you worried about them. I know what that means. And frankly, I don't know if I can continue with you, knowing that you have a family that you hid from me." She took a step back, her expression softening for a moment before firming again. I'm not the woman you need, Jordan. I can't compete with a past that you didn't have the courage to face. I deserve someone who is transparent, who no longer has secrets. Jordan felt the world collapse around him. He tried to reach her, but she was already moving away, her steps quick and determined. "Isabella, please," he began, but his words sounded empty. She had already made her decision. Isabella didn't look back. With a heavy sigh, she left the party, leaving Jordan alone, lost in a sea of regret and confusion. The room was quiet for a moment, as if the world around Jordan had slowed down. He turned slowly, looking for Clara. She watched him from afar, her gaze worried but full of understanding. She knew what was happening, and more importantly, she knew what he was feeling. Jordan walked towards her, his step uncertain. When he got close, there were no more words to say. Clara knew exactly what he needed to hear, but she also knew that the pain and loss were much deeper than simple words could heal. I don't know what to do now, Clara," Jordan murmured, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I lost Isabella. I hurt her, and now everything is falling apart." Clara looked at him, her softness belying the harshness of her feelings. "You haven't lost everything, Jordan," she replied calmly. "You still have a chance to make things right. If you really want to build something with the boys, then it's time to start over, not for what you've lost, but for what you can still achieve." Jordan looked into her eyes, as if trying to find an answer there, a light to guide him through the darkness that was descending upon him. I want to, Clara. I want to make amends. I want to be a good father to John and Jonathan. I want to be a part of their lives. To be there, I want to show you, to everyone, that I can be a better person." Clara nodded, a lightness in her eyes, as if she sensed that he was finally beginning to understand what really mattered. "Then start now, Jordan. There's no point in talking. Show it with your actions. It's not too late." He took a deep breath, feeling determination rise within him. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew it was the only path worth taking. Jordan stepped away from Clara a little and looked at the boys, who were playing with a few other guests on the beach. They looked so natural, so complete in their innocence. He wished he could be with them, wished he could have been a bigger part of their lives, but more than that, he wished he was someone worthy of their trust, someone they could call their father. "I'll do it, Clara," he said firmly. "I'll show them that I can be the father they deserve." And as Isabella walked away from the resort, taking a piece of her heart with her, Jordan made a decision. He knew he could no longer hide his truth. He would face his past, make amends, and somehow win back what he should never have lost. The sun was slowly setting, turning the sky golden and pink. Jordan sat on the sand, watching John and Jonathan run around him, laughing and playing like two children who didn't have the weight of the world on their shoulders. The waves of the ocean gently lapped the beach, creating a peaceful melody that seemed to invite everyone to relax and enjoy the moment. He still felt a little out of place, as if he was trying to find his place in this new setting, but something was changing inside him. With every laugh he shared with the boys, with every curious look he received from them, Jordan felt the weight of responsibility grow on his shoulders, but in a way that no longer seemed scary. He was beginning to realize how much these boys were a part of him, as if the blood ties they shared with him ran deeper than he had ever imagined. John ran up to him with a plastic toy in his hand, handing it to him with a wide smile. "Daddy, catch it!" he shouted, his eyes shining with anticipation. Jordan stared at the toy for a moment, a small toy boat, and then at the boy's smile. It was surreal, but at the same time, something inside Jordan warmed him. Daddy. He never imagined that such a title could be so natural. He grabbed the toy, throwing it into the air, and John ran after him, laughing. Jonathan soon joined in, both of them gently fighting for possession of the toy, their laughter echoing across the beach. "You guys are fast, huh?" Jordan commented with a genuine smile on his face, something he hadn't felt like doing in a long time. "But I'm faster." And before the boys could protest, he ran in the opposite direction, making them chase him. As they played, Clara watched from a distance, her smile soft, but a look of doubt still lingering in her eyes. She was happy to see the boys so happy, but she also knew that things would not be so easy. There was a long road ahead, a road full of rebuilding and confidence. However, in that moment, she allowed herself to simply enjoy the scene. Jordan, now free from the pressures of an uncertain future, was beginning to loosen up. He was no longer the young architect who looked to the future with despair, seeking only material success. Now, he was here, with his children, not knowing what tomorrow would bring, but feeling that perhaps it would be enough. The laughter, the small conversations, the gestures of affection, all of it made him realize that true wealth was not in diamonds or mansions, but in the simple moments he was creating with John and Jonathan. That night, after dinner, as they settled into the porch of the beach house, the boys were tired but happy. John snuggled into Jordan's lap, pulling his arm for support, while Jonathan, his eyes still shining, spoke softly, almost as if he were pondering something important. "Daddy," Jonathan said, looking at Jordan with curiosity in his eyes, "will you always play with us like this?" Jordan was surprised by the question, but his heart warmed. He looked at the boys and with a voice full of sincerity answered, "Yes, whenever I can. I promise." John, still in Jordan's lap, smiled and said with a mischievous glint in his eyes, "And will you teach us to swim, like in the movie?" Jordan laughed, remembering an adventure movie the boys loved to watch, where the heroes faced great challenges in the sea. "I'll teach you to swim and much more," he replied with a fond smile. "You're going to be great adventurers." Time seemed to slow down when Jordan was with the boys. It was as if everything around him disappeared, and there was only this moment, this shared happiness. Even though there was still much to do, he felt more complete than ever. Little by little, the boys were coming closer to him, trusting him, and Jordan knew he needed to be there, with them, to guide them, to be the father they deserved. As night fell, Jordan sat next to Clara on the porch, watching the boys, who were already falling asleep, exhausted from playing so much. Clara turned to him, her smile soft but full of understanding. "You're doing the right thing, Jordan," she said, her voice quiet. "They need you, and you're being the father they deserve." Jordan looked at the boys and then at Clara, feeling a deeper connection with her. "I just wish I had started sooner, Clara. I wish I had seen this sooner." Clara gave him a supportive look. "It doesn't matter when, Jordan. What matters is that you're here now." Jordan knew the road ahead would still be long and full of challenges, but in that moment he felt like he had taken the first step toward rebuilding not only his relationship with Clara, but more importantly, toward forming the bonds that should never have been broken with John and Jonathan. He watched them for a moment longer, his heart lighter now, filled with renewed hope. The sun shone brightly in the sky, bathing the room in a soft, welcoming light. The garden of the beach house was decorated simply, but with a beauty that reflected the new phase that Clara and Jordan were experiencing. A few tables were scattered around, with fresh flowers and candles that were already starting to light as the night approached. Friends and family began to arrive, bringing smiles, greetings, and an air of celebration. But what made this event special was not the flowers or the decorations, but the visible change in the lives of Jordan, Clara, and the boys. Jordan, who had previously been so focused on his material achievements and the success he could show off, now felt at home, surrounded by the people who truly mattered. He watched the boys, John and Jonathan, as they ran around, laughing and playing with the other children present. He stood there next to Clara, with a genuine smile on his face, a smile that rarely appeared before when he was so immersed in his own ambitions. "They are amazing, aren't they?" Clara said, looking at the boys with a sparkle in her eyes. She was standing next to Jordan, and their arms brushed casually. The feeling of being together again, no longer as mere acquaintances from the past, but as a real family, was starting to materialize. "Yes, they are," Jordan replied, his eyes fixed on the children, but with a softness on his face that was difficult to imagine before. "I never imagined I could be so happy like this." He hesitated for a moment, the sentence escaping his mouth, as if it was something still new, as if he were trying to convince himself that it was real. Clara smiled, knowing how much those words meant to him. Jordan's transformation was evident. He was no longer the man obsessed with showing off his fortune, his success. Now, he was there, with her and his children, living a simple and pure moment, but one that carried more value than any award or achievement he had obtained throughout his career. The conversation was interrupted by John, who ran towards them with a curious and excited expression. "Daddy, Clara, look what I made!" He held out his hand, showing a small sculpture made from pieces of wood he had found in the garden. It was a simple toy, but his eyes shone with such pride that it seemed like the greatest treasure in the world. Jordan knelt down to take a closer look and picked up the sculpture carefully. "Did you make this by yourself?" he asked in amazement. "Yes, I learned from Jonathan," John replied excitedly. "We're going to make an entire city out of wood." Jordan smiled fondly and looked at Clara. "I'm sure you'll make a wonderful city." The gathering continued with laughter and conversation, and in the midst of it all, Jordan couldn't help but think about how his life had changed. In the past, he would have focused on throwing a big party, on impressing his guests with the luxury and grandeur of everything around him. But in that moment, he realized that true happiness wasn't found in the expensive, dazzling details of a party. It wasn't in the imported cars or the luxurious mansion. True happiness was found in John and Jonathan's laughter, in the exchange of glances with Clara, in the simple fact of being there, living one day at a time, with the people he loved. "I love you, Jordan," Clara said, her voice soft but full of emotion. She was standing next to him, watching the boys play, and Jordan watched her with a genuine smile. "I love you too," Jordan replied with a sincerity he never imagined he would be capable of expressing. "And more than that, I love what our life is becoming. I just wish I had started sooner." Clara looked at him, placing her hand on his shoulder, her expression one of understanding. "The important thing is that you are here now, that we are together now. There is no past anymore, Jordan, only the present and the future." As the guests chatted and enjoyed the simple but delicious food, Jordan stepped away from the hustle and bustle and sat in a quiet corner of the garden. He took a deep breath, feeling the gentle breeze on his face, and watched the boys run around, their steps quick and full of energy. They were having fun, but more than that, they were creating memories that they would one day look back on fondly. Jordan realized that success, the true achievement in life, was not in money or possessions. He could have all of those things, but what really mattered were the moments he was sharing with Clara, John, and Jonathan. That was the true richness, the laughter, the moments of connection, and the unconditional love that he was beginning to fully understand. The sparkle in the boys' eyes, the way Clara looked at him, the way they were all approaching each other like a family, with no pressure, no expectations, just being. It was more than he could have ever imagined. As the sun set, leaving the sky golden and the air still warm from the afternoon, Jordan felt a sense of peace he had never known before. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but there was nothing he wanted more than to stay here with them. because he had discovered true happiness. And for the first time, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Clara came over and sat down next to him. "Is everything okay?" she asked softly. "It's more than okay, Clara," Jordan replied, with a calm, content smile. "It's perfect." The small gathering in the garden had dissolved, with the guests already leaving. But Jordan and Clara remained there, sitting together, watching the stars begin to appear in the sky. John and Jonathan, their faces radiant with happiness, were still playing, running around, immersed in their own world of innocence and joy. Jordan looked at Clara, his eyes reflecting a deep tenderness. He knew that their journey up to this point had been long and full of obstacles, but the peace that now enveloped them was something he had never imagined would be possible. Even in the face of so many mistakes, distance and separations, he felt that he was living the most genuine moment of his life. Clara, for her part, seemed thoughtful. She looked at the boys, her smile light, but her eyes carrying the wisdom of years and experiences. She knew that the path ahead would not be easy, that rebuilding what had once been lost would require patience, effort, and above all, commitment. Yet the love she felt for Jordan was still there, not in the overwhelming way it had been before, but in a mature, realistic way, something she knew she needed to nurture and strengthen each day. "Jordan," Clara began, her voice soft but full of meaning. He looked at her intently, waiting for her to continue. "I still love you, but we need to be honest about what we can expect from each other now. What happened in the past can't be what defines our relationship anymore. We need to build something new, in the present, based on trust and the understanding that we can't go back in time." Jordan listened intently, his heart pounding, not with fear, but with renewed excitement, something he felt for the first time since they had parted ways. He knew what Clara meant. They couldn't erase what had happened, but they could shape the future in a different way, truer and closer to what they both truly needed. "I understand," Jordan replied sincerely. "I never imagined I would have a second chance with you, but now that I do, I know I can't make the same mistakes. I want to build something with you, with the boys. I don't care what the world expects of us or what I've already achieved. I just want to be here, with you and with John and Jonathan." Clara smiled, her face softening at what he had just said. She felt like he was finally understanding the depth of everything they had lost and everything they could gain. She wanted to believe his words, and she knew that if it were possible, what lay before them could be more beautiful than any dream she had ever had. "So, let's start over," she said, her tone firm but also hopeful. "Let's create a life together, a real family, with love, with respect, and with the knowledge that happiness lies in what we have now, in what we will build. Let's make this our home, not just for us, but for John and Jonathan." Jordan looked into her eyes, his gaze filled with emotion and gratitude. He knew this would be the most important challenge of his life. It was no longer about the buildings he would build or the fortune he would amass. It was about building a home, and he was ready to do it with all the strength he had. "I'm ready," Jordan said, with a calmness that reflected his commitment to Clara and the family he was beginning to understand he needed to build. "I'm ready to start over, to build this home, this love, to be the father John and Jonathan deserve, to be the man you deserve." Clara moved closer to him, and they shared a silent embrace, feeling each other's presence, the warmth and security of knowing that although the past had shaped them, the future was there, open to new possibilities. They had a chance to start over. The boys, with the energy typical of childhood, ran and played around them, creating a sense of normalcy and a future. Their happiness was not found in grand gestures or grandiose moments, but in the little things of everyday life, in the laughter, in the stories shared, in the quiet nights and mornings full of possibilities. Time passed, and the story of Jordan, Clara, John, and Jonathan became a new beginning. They were no longer the same. The love between Jordan and Clara, now more mature and aware, began to blossom again, and the boys, with the love of their parents, grew up in an environment full of support and affection. Their story was, after all, about the power of starting over, about the strength of truth, and about how, even after great mistakes, love and family could heal, transform, and give meaning to life. Together, as a united family, Jordan, Clara, and the boys were ready to face the future no longer as individuals pursuing their own interests, but as a true unit, united by love and a commitment to never again let the past interfere with what the future had in store for them. Did you like today's story? So leave your like, subscribe to our channel, and activate the notification bell. By doing this, you will stay on top of everything that happens here on our channel, and you will not miss any exciting story.